My earliest memories are tainted with the subtle sting of comparison. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" Mom would say, shaking her head as I sat reading in my corner while Katie entertained guests with her theatrical stories. I was 8, she was 6, and already the pattern was set. "Emily, honey, why don't you join the conversation?" Dad would encourage, but his tone carried disappointment rather than support. Meanwhile, Katie would be perched on his knee, getting all the laughs with her silly jokes and animated expressions. The favoritism wasn't just in the little things, it showed up in every aspect of our lives. When Katie started ballet classes at age 7, she got brand new pink tutus and the most expensive shoes. When I asked to join band class a year later, Mom sighed about the budget and found me a second-hand flute on eBay. I remember one particular Christmas when I was 12. I'd been hoping for a new laptop to help with my schoolwork. Instead, I got some clothes and books, while Katie received an iPhone, despite being only 10. "She needs it to stay in touch with all her friends," Mom justified, while I swallowed my protests about needing the laptop for my advanced placement classes. My grandmother, Dad's mother, was the only one who seemed to see me for who I was. During those endless summers when my parents took Katie on family vacations without me, Grandma Martha would welcome me into her small but cozy house with open arms. "They're leaving me behind again," I complained one day, fighting back tears as I watched them pack the car for another trip to Disney World. Grandma pulled me close and whispered, "Their loss, sweetheart. You and I will have our own adventure." She always made those abandoned summers special, teaching me to bake her famous apple pie and telling me stories about her own childhood. One evening, when I was 15, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I'd stopped to get a glass of water after hours of studying for my SATs. "We need to start thinking about college funds," Dad was saying. "Well, we can only afford to send one of them," Mom replied matter-of-factly. "Katie's showing such promise in drama club, she could really make it in performing arts." "What about Emily?" Dad asked, but his voice lacked conviction. "Emily's smart. She'll figure something out. Maybe she can get scholarships." I stood there, glass forgotten in my hand, as their words sank in. That night marked a turning point for me. If they wouldn't invest in my future, I'd have to do it myself. From then on, I threw myself into every academic opportunity one could find. Science fairs, debate clubs, math competitions, I participated in them all. While Katie was going on dates with boys from her middle school class, I was staying up late preparing presentations and polishing my college applications. "Emily, you're just jealous that your sister has a social life," Mom would say whenever I tried to point out that Katie's boy-crazy behavior seemed inappropriate for a 14-year-old. I'd retreat to my room, clutching my academic medals and certificates, reminding myself that someday, all this work would pay off. Someday, I'd build a life where I wouldn't have to compete for love or attention. I just had to survive high school first. All those late nights of studying and participating in every possible academic competition finally paid off. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school, with a full scholarship to State University School of Business Management. The day I got my acceptance letter, I ran to show my parents, but they were busy helping Katie prepare for her latest date. Moving to the dorms was like taking my first real breath of fresh air. My roommate, Sarah, became the sister I'd always wanted, someone who actually celebrated my achievements and supported my goals. The distance from my family felt liberating rather than lonely. The rare phone calls home always followed the same pattern. "Katie's dating the captain of the football team now," Mom would gush, not even asking about my classes. "She's so popular, everyone just loves her. Are you dating anyone, Emily?" I'd mumble something about focusing on my studies and end the call as quickly as possible. The truth was, I was thriving. My professors praised my work ethic, and I was making real friends who valued me for who I was. Then, in my 3rd year, the bomb dropped. During one of our infrequent family calls, Mom casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, Katie got accepted to Prestige University. We're so proud. We found her the cutest apartment near campus, you should see the view." Your father and I are handling all the expenses, of course. We want her to focus on her studies without worrying about money." I sat there in my cramped dorm room, phone pressed to my ear, fighting back tears of anger and hurt. The same parents who couldn't afford to help me with college were now fully funding Katie's education at one of the most expensive universities in the country. But I channeled that anger into determination. I graduated with honors and landed a job at Mitchell & Associates, one of the top consulting firms in the city. 2 years of working my ass off earned me a promotion to senior consultant. The night of the announcement, my colleagues insisted on taking me out to celebrate at the Blue Room, a trendy bar downtown. That's where I met James. He was charming, successful, and actually interested in hearing about my career. We exchanged numbers, and soon we were dating. For 2 years, everything felt perfect. James made me feel valued and loved, something I'd never really experienced with my family. Then came the wedding invitation from Katie. She was marrying Richard Thompson III, some hotshot real estate developer she'd met at college. I almost didn't go, but James convinced me it would look worse if I didn't attend. The wedding was exactly what you'd expect, over the top and excessive. Katie practically floated around in her designer gown, making sure everyone knew she was becoming Mrs. Thompson before her big sister had even gotten engaged. I always knew I'd be first down the aisle, she smirked when we had our obligatory sister moment at the reception. I mean, you were always so focused on your career and everything. But don't worry, maybe someday you'll find someone too. I plastered on my best fake smile and sipped my champagne, reminding myself that her approval didn't matter anymore. I had a good job, a loving boyfriend, and a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. A year after Katie's wedding, James and I were living together in a cozy apartment downtown. One night, after making dinner together, he got down on one knee in our tiny kitchen and took out a ring. My heart soared. I said yes and practically jumped into his arms. The ring wasn't as flashy as Katie's massive diamond, but it was perfect for me, elegant and understated. When I called my parents to share the news, Mom's response was predictably lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice, dear. We should meet him properly. Bring him over this weekend." The meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd expected. Katie showed up uninvited, of course, wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than our monthly rent. "So you finally found someone willing to marry you," she said with that familiar condescending smile. "I was starting to worry you'd end up alone with your spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations." James squeezed my hand under the table, helping me keep my cool. To my surprise, Mom and Dad seemed to warm up to him during dinner. "We should host your engagement party," Mom suddenly announced. "We'll handle everything. It's the least we can do, considering we couldn't contribute to your education." The casual way she mentioned their financial favoritism made my blood boil, but James looked so excited about the idea that I agreed. 2 months later, we drove back to my parents' house for the party. They had actually done a nice job with the decorations, and seeing all our relatives gathered to celebrate us made me think that maybe, just maybe, things were changing. Katie showed up alone, explaining that Richard was away on business. She kept making snide comments about my dress being budget-friendly and how she could recommend a better wedding planner than the one we were considering. The party was in full swing when I realized I hadn't seen James for a while. "Has anyone seen my fiancé?" I asked, but everyone was too busy enjoying themselves to pay attention. Something felt off. I started searching through the house, eventually heading upstairs. As I approached my old bedroom, I heard noises that made my stomach drop. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. The door creaked open, and there they were, James and Katie, tangled in the sheets of my childhood bed. "Emily, wait. I can explain." James scrambled to get dressed, his face red with either shame or exertion, I couldn't tell which. Katie didn't even bother covering herself properly. She just lay there with that smug smile I'd known my entire life. "Oh, Emily," she purred, "James just figured out what I've known all along. I'm the better sister. Always have been, always will be." My hands were shaking so badly I had to lean against the doorframe. 28 years of being second best, and now this? I opened my mouth to scream, to finally let out decades of hurt and rage. But before I could, Mom and Dad burst into the room, obviously having heard the commotion. Mom took one look at the scene and burst into tears. "Emily, sweetie, please," she grabbed my arm, her voice trembling. "You can't tell anyone about this. Think about your sister." Dad joined in, his face ashen. "If Richard finds out about this, he'll divorce her. There's a prenup, she won't get a penny. Please, Emily, think about what this would do to the family." I stared at them in disbelief. Even now, even after catching my fiancé in bed with my married sister, their only concern was protecting Katie. "Please, baby, I'm so sorry." James was fully dressed now, reaching for me. "It was a mistake." She came onto me, and I yanked my arm away from his grasp. The clarity that washed over me in that moment was almost peaceful. Without a word, I turned and walked downstairs to where our guests were still celebrating. "Everyone," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "I have an announcement to make. There will not be a wedding. I'm very sorry for any inconvenience this may cause, especially to those who traveled to be here today. Please enjoy the food and drinks, but I need to leave now." Ignoring the gasps and whispers, I grabbed my purse and car keys. I could hear James calling after me, could see my mother's mascara-streaked face pleading with me, but I didn't stop. The drive home was a blur. As soon as I got to my apartment, I went into autopilot mode. I pulled out every cardboard box we had stored in the closet and methodically packed up James's belongings. Clothes, books, his precious golf clubs, everything that was his went into boxes. I drove to the nearest storage facility, rented a unit, and dropped off all his things. Then I sent him one final text with the unit number and access code before blocking his number, his email, and all his social media accounts. My phone kept buzzing with messages from my parents, warnings about family loyalty, pleas to keep quiet about what happened, guilt trips about how this would destroy Katie's marriage. I blocked their numbers too. As I sat alone in my half-empty apartment that night, I realized something. This wasn't just about James's betrayal. This was the culmination of a lifetime of my family choosing Katie over me. They'd chosen her happiness over mine one too many times, and I was finally done. I poured myself a glass of wine and deleted Katie's contact information next. Then my parents. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. 3 years after the engagement disaster, I was grabbing coffee at a local market when I literally bumped into Michael. My coffee splashed all over his white shirt, and instead of getting angry, he laughed and asked if I'd let him buy me another one. I hesitated. After James, I'd sworn off dating, throwing myself into my work instead. But there was something different about Michael. Maybe it was his genuine smile or the way he didn't try too hard to impress me. "I promise I'm not a serial killer," he joked, noticing my reluctance. "Just a clumsy architect who'd like to replace your coffee and maybe get your number." "Just coffee," I said firmly, but somehow that coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into more dates. Michael never pushed. He understood my trust issues when I finally told him about James and Katie, and he let our relationship develop at my pace. No grand gestures, no rushing, just genuine care and respect. 2 years later, he proposed during a quiet evening at home. No fancy restaurant, no audience, just us, some takeout Chinese, and a simple but beautiful ring. I said yes without hesitation. When his parents, Tom and Linda, insisted on throwing us a big wedding, my first instinct was to refuse. But they were so genuinely excited about welcoming me to their family, and Linda even took me shopping for a wedding dress, insisting on paying for it herself. I invited Grandma Martha first. She'd been my rock through everything. Then my aunts, uncles, and cousins who had always treated me with genuine affection. But the question of my parents loomed large. After weeks of internal debate, I finally picked up the phone. "Mom? It's Emily." "Emily," she sounded shocked, but happy. We've heard about your engagement from Aunt Sarah. We were hoping. I'm calling to invite you and Dad to the wedding, I cut in before I could lose my nerve. Oh, sweetheart, we'd love to come. Have you sent an invitation to Katie and Richard? You know your sister would want to be there. No, I said firmly, my hand tightening around the phone. And I won't be inviting her. She lost that right when she slept with my fiancé at my engagement party. While she was married, I might add. I expected the usual protests, the usual excuses for Katie's behavior. Instead, there was just silence on the other end of the line. The wedding is next month, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll email you the details. My wedding day started perfectly. The venue looked beautiful, Michael's family had handled every detail with love and care, and I felt like a princess in my dress. But that perfect bubble burst the moment I walked into the reception hall. There she was, Katie, standing next to our parents, wearing a tight dress that showed off her obviously pregnant belly. She had that same smug smile I'd seen in my old bedroom 3 years ago, and she had the nerve to wink at me. Her husband, Richard, standing next to her. I marched straight to my parents, my hands shaking with rage. What is she doing here? I hissed. I specifically said she wasn't invited. Now, Emily, Mom said in that patronizing tone I knew so well, you're being ridiculous. Katie is your sister. Of course she needs to be at your wedding. That unfortunate incident was years ago, it's time to move on and forgive. I felt my world starting to spin, but then Michael's hand found mine and squeezed gently. His touch anchored me, reminding me that this was our day, and I wouldn't let them ruin it. I took a deep breath and walked away, focusing on the fact that I was marrying the most wonderful man I'd ever met. The ceremony went smoothly, and soon we were at the reception. Everything was fine until the toasts began. Mom stood up first, glass in hand. I'm so happy that my second daughter has finally found her match, she said, smiling at the crowd. Though of course, Katie was first down the aisle, wasn't she? You two have always been so close, sharing everything. She went on and on about Katie's wedding, her marriage, her pregnancy, barely mentioning me or Michael. I gripped my champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Michael's mom, Linda, reached over and patted my knee sympathetically. But the worst was yet to come. Katie stood up next, smoothing her dress over her pregnant belly. As the maid of honor at my own wedding, she started, completely ignoring the fact that I'd barely attended her wedding, let alone been part of it. Emily has always looked up to me. And I've always looked out for her. In fact, a few years ago, I actually saved her from making a huge mistake. She paused for dramatic effect, shooting me a knowing look. She owes me for that, really. Everything I've done has been for her own good. The sheer audacity of her words, twisting her betrayal into some sort of sisterly favor, made my blood boil. She was actually standing there, at my wedding that she wasn't even invited to, bragging about sleeping with my ex-fiancé. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was firm as I stood up, my champagne glass still in hand. You know what? Let me tell you all a story, I said, my voice clear and strong, despite my racing heart. Yes, I love Michael with all my heart. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He's shown me what real love and support look like. But a few years ago, I was engaged to another man. We had our engagement party at my parents' house, just like Katie mentioned, the party she so conveniently left out the details about. The room fell silent. Katie's smug smile began to fade, replaced by a look of uncertainty I'd never seen on her face before. During that party, my dear sister, who was married at the time, I might add, decided to seduce my fiancé. While her husband was away on business, I found her in bed with the man I was supposed to marry. In my childhood bedroom, no less. The same bedroom where I spent countless nights studying to earn my own way through college, while our parents paid for her apartment at that prestigious university. Gasps echoed through the reception hall. The sound of silverware clattering against plates punctuated the shocked silence. Richard, Katie's husband, stood up slowly, his face ashen, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "Is this true?" Katie's perfectly crafted composure finally cracked. Her mascara began to run as tears welled up in her eyes. "Yes, but Richard, I can explain. It wasn't like that." Richard turned and walked out of the reception hall without another word, his steps echoing in the stunned silence. Katie ran after him, her pregnant belly making her awkward as she rushed through the door, calling his name desperately. "Emily!" Mom screeched, her face contorted with rage, her carefully styled hair coming loose as she jumped to her feet. "How dare you? You've ruined everything. Why couldn't you just keep quiet like you always do? Why did you have to make a scene at your own wedding?" "No, Mom," I replied calmly, feeling oddly peaceful now that the truth was finally out. "You ruined everything when you brought her here after I specifically said she wasn't invited. You ruined everything every time you chose her over me. You ruined everything when you defended her after she betrayed me in the worst possible way. This is just the consequences of your choices finally catching up to all of you." Our parents stormed out, following Katie and Richard, their angry mutters fading as they left the hall. The reception hall was silent for a moment, the tension thick in the air. Then Michael stood up and took my hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "Well," he said with a warm smile that reached his eyes, "I believe we were in the middle of celebrating our wedding. Would anyone like to dance?" Aunt Sarah was the first to start clapping, followed by Grandma Martha, then Michael's family, and soon the whole room was applauding. Linda hugged me tight, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You did the right thing." The aftermath of my wedding unfolded like a soap opera, but I watched it all from a safe distance while enjoying my honeymoon in Hawaii with Michael. Through family gossip, mainly from Aunt Sarah and Grandma Martha, I learned about everything that happened after Katie chased Richard out of our reception. Richard filed for divorce the very next week. Katie tried everything to stop him, tears, promises, threats, but he wouldn't budge. When her baby was born 2 months later, Richard demanded a DNA test. I wasn't surprised when it revealed what Katie probably knew all along: the baby wasn't his. Thanks to their prenup and the proof of her infidelity, Katie walked away with nothing. No alimony, no house, no luxury car, nothing but the clothes in her closet and her collection of designer handbags. Mom and Dad had to sell their vacation home to help pay for Katie's legal fees. She moved back in with them, bringing her newborn son with her. The irony wasn't lost on me. The golden child who had everything handed to her on a silver platter was now sleeping in her old bedroom, living off our parents' retirement savings. They tried to blame me, of course. The angry phone call started about a month after my wedding. "You've ruined your sister's life," Mom screamed into my voicemail. "If you had just kept your mouth shut, everything would have been fine." "You're no longer our daughter," Dad declared in his message. "We raised you better than this." I blocked their numbers again, but they found new ways to reach out: emails, messages through relatives, even a letter sent to my office. Each time, the message was the same: I was the villain in their story, the jealous older sister who destroyed poor Katie's perfect life. But I had a new life now, one filled with love and genuine support. Michael's family welcomed me with open arms. His mother Linda called me every Sunday just to chat. His sister became the best friend I never had growing up. Even his gruff father Tom showed his affection in his own way, always making sure to save me the biggest piece of his famous barbecue brisket at family gatherings. "You know what the best part of marriage is?" Michael asked me one evening as we cuddled on our couch, watching the sunset from our new home, the one we bought together, without any help from either of our families. "What's that?" "Getting to choose your family," he said, kissing my forehead. "Blood doesn't always mean love, but love always means family." He was right. I finally had what I'd always wanted: a family that loved me for who I was, not what they wanted me to be. A husband who celebrated my successes instead of comparing them to someone else's. In-laws who treated me like a daughter, not a disappointment. Grandma Martha still visits us regularly, and she adores Michael. "I always knew you'd find your way, sweetheart," she told me during her last visit. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the best destinations. I don't know what happened to Katie after that, and honestly, I don't care to know. I heard through the grapevine that she's still living with our parents, trying to rebuild her life. Sometimes I wonder if they finally see her for who she really is, or if they're still making excuses for her behavior. But those thoughts don't keep me up at night anymore. I have my own family now, one built on trust, respect, and genuine love. Michael and I are expecting our first child, and I know this baby will grow up in a home where they're valued for exactly who they are, not compared to anyone else. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well. And that's exactly what I'm doing.